Hi, it's Jessica Namasa with What's the Future of Health. I talk to the who's who of health tech and healthcare innovation, and today I'm talking deep science a little more than usual. We are going to meet some of the movers and shakers in biotech, and they're here to get us smart on a brand new technology that can create an entirely new class of medicines, not just new medicines, an entirely new class of medicines. So here to get us smart on this, which has tremendous impacts for health innovation all along the healthcare ecosystem, are our two experts. We've got Adam Schayowitz. He is the development head for breast cancer at Pfizer, and Ian Taylor. He's the chief scientific officer at a biotech company called Arvinas. Great to have you guys here.
Thank you. It's
great to be here.
All right, so let's get into this. I have to admit, I had no idea what targeted protein degradation technology was before it was pitched to me. But when I learned about it, I mean, this is pretty incredible. So let's start everybody off there and get a baseline going. And so why don't you just introduce us to this technology? Tell us about targeted protein degradation technology, what it is and how it works.
Sure, I can do that. So yeah, targeted protein degradation is a new therapeutic modality that's been emerging. Our company is 10 years old now. We were one of the first companies to be doing targeted protein degradation solely. And what it is we use small molecules, small chemical molecules, sort of like you're used to taking as a medicine. And we use that to degrade disease-causing proteins, basically eliminating them from the cell. Because as you know, a lot of diseases, cancer in particular, is caused by proteins that have become dysregulated. They might be mutated, and so an enzyme might be stuck in the on position instead of being able to be turned off. It might be just made more of the protein than is normally made in the cell. And this leads to diseases such as cancer. And so with targeted protein degradation, what we're doing is we're tapping into the cell's normal way that they degrade proteins, because the cell is constantly degrading proteins to keep the cell in normal homeostasis, as we call it. So if a protein becomes mutated or misfolded or just outlives its natural usefulness in the cell degrades it. In the case of the disease-causing proteins, it doesn't get degraded quickly enough. And there's many different ways the cell degrades proteins. The one that we tap into most is called the ubiquitin proteasome system. It's called that because that's the steps that are taken to degrade the protein. So it gets tagged by a protein called ubiquitin. That signals it to go off to this multi-enzyme organelle called the proteasome, where it gets chopped up into its component peptides and ultimately amino acids. So just chopped to bits. So what our targeted protein degradation, the small molecules, we call them PROTACs or proteolysis targeting chimeras. What it does is one end of the molecule, it's a small molecule, binds to the target protein that we want to degrade. So let's just call it the estrogen receptor in breast cancer. And the other end of the molecule binds to a component of the ubiquitin proteasome system, or the UPS we call it. And by bringing those two proteins, the target protein estrogen receptor and the UPS component, in close proximity, that's basically our way of telling the cell, we want you to degrade this protein that causes disease.
So thank you for explaining that, because I mean, this is pretty deep science for me. And so I feel like if I can understand that and I can understand the benefit, most of my audience probably has it too. All right, let's talk why you guys are interested, the partnership between Pfizer and Arvinas. Why go into researching this modality? Like, what is the promise in this technology that had brought your two companies together to, really look into expanding, the targeted protein degradation tech that you're using?
Besides Ian Taylor, of course.
Right? Yeah, well, of course.
All right. So besides Ian, no, I mean, I think all kidding aside, I mean, so as you may know, right, I mean, Pfizer's had a huge presence in breast cancer historically. It's been a mainstay in our oncology portfolio for a number of years. If you think about how breast cancer is treated, right, and the disease itself, it's treated by kind of two fundamental modalities. You've got drugs that inhibit cell cycle, so how the cell is kind of growing, and then you've got drugs that target the estrogen receptor, which is kind of the fuel for the fire of breast cancer. And Ian talked a little bit about the estrogen receptor before. So when we think about, like, how do we, from a Pfizer lens, how do we continue to lead in breast cancer? How do we continue to be a key player in breast cancer? It's about understanding and developing novel therapies that are going to improve on the existing drugs that inhibit cell cycle control and existing drugs that target the estrogen receptor. And we saw as one of these, potential molecules that has the potential ability to change the way that breast cancer is treated through this novel mechanism of targeting the estrogen receptor, which, as I just said, is kind of one of those two key modalities in the disease itself. So really just the opportunity to have a huge impact on the future disease and the treatment of the disease.
All right, Ian, back to you here. How are, generally speaking, how are protein degraders real game changers when it comes to the potential for creating new medicines like we talked about, or a brand new class of medicines, or just even the impact that it's going to have on patients?
And I think what really excites people about targeted protein degradation the most is there's a whole class of proteins that are thought to be disease-causing, but have just been refractory to drug discovery for a number of different reasons. These are called the undruggables, right? And those of us who've been in the industry for a long, long time have seen these proteins, like KRAS was one example, that used to be thought to be undruggable for the longest time. Now there's molecules out there against it, but there's a whole host of proteins that were like, oh, if we could only target those, we would really impact the disease and help patients. But they're refractory for various reasons. They just don't, small molecules just don't bind very well to them. There aren't these nooks and crannies and crevices that you can stick an inhibitor in there and jam the function. It's just, they're like a bowling ball almost. Whereas with targeted protein degradation, you don't have to bind very long or very tightly, really, because you're trying to just form that complex with the ubiquitin proteasome system to degrade. So the promise of it is, wow, we can potentially not only just go after known targets in a new way, degrading over inhibiting, but we can go after proteins that we've never been able to go after before because of the way the PROTAC works. And I think that's what's really captured the imagination, certainly captured my imagination 7 years ago when I joined this company from Pfizer, because again, being in the business for a long time, if we could only go after these undruggables, that would be a game changer. Now, we still have a long way to go to prove that, but we're making progress, and that's really exciting.
No, I love hearing the vision and your passion for it. Adam, what would you add to that? What do you see as the real game-changing aspect of a protein degrader?
Yeah, I think this is a novel mechanism, right? We're not just trying to make an incremental improvement on something that already exists. This is a different approach to targeting the estrogen receptor, which will hopefully have game-changing effects, right? So it's not one of these incremental improvements. We hope that it will have the ability to be dramatically more impactful to patients from a therapeutic perspective.
Let's get into this a little bit more here. So thank you for that high level look at what's going on. And now I understand that the first area you mentioned it is breast cancer. So let's talk about that. Let's unpack this a little bit. So tell me what's going on here right now. I understand that there are some things being tested at the clinical trial level. So let's talk about what that is. What's being tested at the trial level, what's undergoing testing right now.
Yeah, so I think as you and others know, right? Drug development, especially in oncology, has multiple phases. You start, with phase one, which are smaller programs, kind of proving, how does the drug work? Does it work? How does it work? Is it safe and tolerated? You then expand that population typically to phase two programs, and then to phase three, which are larger, more global randomized trials. And we have the compound in multiple in development in multiple clinical trials right now. It's in the registration space or in phase three programs as a monotherapy in the second line, metastatic breast cancer population. And then we also have it in development in multiple combinations, whether existing CDK4/6s or other more novel combinations in earlier phase one and phase two programs. So there's a host of clinical trials across metastatic breast cancer, and then of course we have ambitions for more trials in the future within breast cancer as well.
What can you say about the patient population? Can you tell us a little bit about the patient population that these current trials are focused on, and whether or not you're considering on expanding that in the future?
Yeah, so the patient population that's being targeted right now in the first registration study, the first phase 3 program, is a second line metastatic breast cancer population. So these are patients that have metastatic disease. So they either could be newly diagnosed or they've progressed from localized disease, and the disease is spread outside the original tissue, like to other parts of the body. So it's metastatic disease. they've already received one prior line of therapy, potentially another endocrine therapy, potentially a CDK4/6 inhibitor, but they've received some kind of could be chemotherapy, some kind of upfront therapy, and then they've progressed. So this really is like the next line, the second line in the more advanced disease, and that's the main population that we're talking about in our second line registration program. Yeah, is that helpful to clarify?
Yes, absolutely. So what is, as you're going through the trials with them, what is a positive outcome? Like, what does that look like? And like, what does that mean for them, the patients that are going through the trial?
Yeah, I mean, look, our goal is to help as many patients as possible and help them live as long as possible and as comfortably as possible, right? I think for the trials that we're talking about here in these patients that are in the second line of metastatic disease, the unfortunate reality is that this is probably going to be a terminal disease, right? Like hopefully we can extend the time, but breast cancer will likely be the cause of death for these patients, and that's unfortunate. The approach that we have is to do everything we can to make that time last as long as possible, right? So we call it progression-free survival or overall survival. Those are the primary and secondary endpoints of the study. Progression-free survival is really defined by how long a patient can be on our drug before the disease progresses and becomes resistant or refractory to that treatment. It's progression, it's PFS or progression-free survival, and it's a pretty common endpoint in the oncology space. Of course, one of the other key pieces that we look at is overall survival, which is just asking not just for our treatment, but for subsequent treatments that the patient may be exposed to. Do they just live longer by getting, our medication versus a control arm? So those are really kind of the two key pieces that we're asking is like, will they stay on therapy longer, and will the disease, the progression of the disease be delayed, and will they live longer, right? Those are kind of the two key hard endpoints that we're looking at in the study.
Ian, what would you add? Chime in.
Yeah, that's really well described by Adam. I would say the softer endpoint, and we don't measure this obviously, but when you think about it from a patient perspective, because we are trying to turn it more into a chronic disease, especially for these later stage patients, are they making a birthday that they may not have seen, a graduation, a wedding, some life event that, being on the therapy would help them achieve that they might not, attend or see that they might not otherwise have been able to make. So that's kind of the softer, more human side of what we're trying to do in the later line patients in particular.
I love that. That's wonderful. All right, let's talk a little bit about your partnership, because I love digging into innovative partnership relationships, working on innovation. It's like, an innovation, like, supercharged thing here. And so I want to find out a little bit about it, because, you do often hear about, big pharma companies or big life sciences companies working with biotechs, and that there's, there are things that work really well together, and then there's like some friction. And so I want to dive into that. So, what would you say, like, just, overall, big picture, what can innovators learn from this partnership between Pfizer and Arvinas? Like, as you guys work together, big organization, small organization, you've got the agility on one side, and then you've got, maybe some more red tape and bureaucracy on the other side. I mean, what can innovators learn from the partnership that you guys have established here to move forward on something that is so novel and so bleeding edge? Adam, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I know, appreciate that. So, I mean, look, every company has strengths and weaknesses, right? I mean, it's from the Pfizer point of view, like, it was clear that this area of expertise in protein degradation and the focus in breast cancer was a strategically aligned with our interests within Pfizer, but a subject matter expertise and a molecular expertise and access to compounds that Pfizer didn't have, right? So like the value for us in this partnership is that, Ian and his team and the Arvinas team like bring this, tremendous amount of wealth, with the compound, understanding protein degradation, understanding how to develop it in breast cancer. I think from the Pfizer side, what do we add? Well, I'd like to think that we've put more patients on clinical trials and done as much clinical research in the world in breast cancer as anybody else has, for that matter. So we understand how to run global, large-scale registration processes. We have, extensive, interactions with health authorities around the world. We're very familiar with bringing global programs and commercializing global programs and marketing and manufacturing global programs and distributing it. So we play to the strengths of our relationship, right? We're taking the subject matter expertise and the molecule from Arvinas and combining it with Pfizer's global footprint and global resources and experience in breast cancer to hopefully bring together something that is that's unattainable by either company alone.
What would you add to that, Ian?
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. I think, from our perspective, from a small company perspective, almost everyone in our leadership team has had big pharma experience. So we know what the landscape looks like in terms of what it takes to get into these large registrational studies. And we always knew, especially in the breast cancer field, that when we got to a certain stage, we were going to need to partner to really be able to develop this molecule appropriately, broadly, and quickly. We just weren't going to be able to do that ourselves. And so, I mean, from my perspective and our perspective, Pfizer is the perfect partner for that because of the deep expertise in breast cancer development and commercialization that Adam mentioned. And that's what we were looking for, is because we feel like we have an innovative molecule here, how can we get it to patients quickly, as many patients as we can, get it through the development process, get it through the regulatory process, get it to patients. That was always going to require a partnership. We knew that. And Pfizer brings everything that we were looking for to the table from that perspective.
All right, I want to dig in this a little bit more because I have such a broad audience of, startups and then folks that are in incumbent organizations like a big pharma or life sciences company, or even like a healthcare organization, like a hospital system, or, a healthcare payer organization. And there is this interest there is an interest in the interest of innovation to partner, because you recognize that you're missing, the skill set, the ability to scale, but the ability to be agile at the same time. Right. But, I want to hear a little bit more from both sides of it, because I think that this is just an interesting case, on the real things that can be accomplished in the innovation partnership model. So Adam, I want to start with you. And as the big guy here, right, as the bigger company, why partner? Why not just buy the tech outright? I mean, why not just own that and bring it in-house? Like, what's the true benefit to an organization like Pfizer by having the ability to keep Arvinas separate and work with them as a partner, as opposed to somebody that has come in-house? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, simply put, it's their expertise, right? And I mean, I actually, kind of the opposite of Ian. I spent my career in small biotech before coming to Pfizer, 7 years ago. So I kind of grew up in small companies and had been acquired by big pharmas, 2 or 3 times along the way. And one of the challenges is retaining that expertise and retaining those people when you just do a pure transaction or an acquisition, because a lot of times people go to small companies because they want to work at small companies, or they go to big companies because they want to work at big companies. If a big company were to just go and buy a small company in a transaction, the reality is a lot of that expertise and that institutional knowledge is not necessarily transferred or maintained as efficiently as it could be if you can preserve the heart and soul of the organization. And we try all the time, and we do it fairly well, and as do other companies. But the best way to preserve it is to preserve it, right? Is to keep it. And that's kind of the approach that we took with this one, is like, let's not pretend that we can do this as well as the experts can. Let's work with the experts to figure out how we can bring strengths to the table, and they can bring strengths, and how we can do this together. Because I've seen it from both sides in the course of my career, and I think this is a good mix that we have.
I love that. That was an aha moment for me. I'm like, now I get why you two work so well together, because you both have like opposite backgrounds. It's like, right. Adam, you went from biotech to Pfizer, and Ian, you went from Pfizer to biotech. So there's like a melding of the minds. All right, Ian, weigh in from your side, because what Adam is saying is true here. You want to retain that expertise, and that's beautifully put. Like a small company, you want to work in a small company, you want to stay in a small company. So how maintain that independence and that agility and that small company, like, yeah, we're going to go get them, agility, when you're partnered up though with a Pfizer? I mean, and talk to us too, from like, because like you said earlier, what the red tape is, what the concerns are going to be from having worked in that environment. So share with us some of your best advice for, maybe a startup or another biotech who's working with a big organization. How do you manage that partnership well?
Well, I think, you kind of you have to view it not as you're working with Pfizer. We're working with, which is huge, right? But we're working with Adam and a smaller dedicated team, right? Which kind of matches in size with our team. And so that's where you can maintain the agility, is that, yes, you've got the mothership, as it's often called, to deal with. But the team itself that's on the Pfizer side, they're a small team. And so they're working hopefully just as agilely as we are. And they are, right? They've got the same goal as we have, to get this new modality to patients as quickly as possible. I mean, that's very clear. And that was part of the reason we wanted to work with Pfizer, because they had the same goal. They shared the vision after we spelled it out. So, oh yeah, this is exactly what we should be doing for patients. So from that perspective, if you have that good match with the team like we do, you can maintain the agility. And to be honest, having worked at Pfizer, I knew a lot of the people on the Pfizer side, which was an advantage for me. And I would tell the people here at Arvinas, we've got some A team members here, right? It's not like we're getting the C or D team. We're getting the A team. And that comes with expertise. I mean, a lot of the people on the team are people I learned drug development from. That was a great part about working at Pfizer when I did is, there's a lot of people who have a lot of experience, a lot of expertise. Much like we have expertise in TPD, they have great development expertise. We've been able to tap into that, and we learned, and now we're getting into the commercialization aspect as well, right? So there's a lot of commercial expertise. So, it is very complementary, much like Adam and my careers have been complementary. There's a lot of complementary aspects of our two teams, and that's what helps us be as most productive as possible, go as quickly as possible, and really be as agile as possible. We're constantly reevaluating, making changes based on what we see in the data and the competitive landscape. So it's really not much different than what we've been doing, because we've got a great partner to help us do it.
I love it. It's not Pfizer. It's just Adam. It's just Adam.
Adam and his team, yes.
It's not just me. There's a really smart team of people that spend all day working on this stuff. It's absolutely not just me. But that's a good point, right? I mean, there's essentially one counterpart, right, that's really on that core team at both companies that are working together.
That's excellent. That's awesome. All right. So what can you guys tell us about what's next? Let's end there. I want to hear, what's coming up. Like, when are these breast cancer trials supposed to be completed if everything goes well? When will we have an answer there? And then, what else? Like, where do you take this targeted protein degradation technology next? Do you expand into other therapeutic areas? I mean, like, give us a little bit of foreshadowing here on what we can expect. Ian, can you start us off?
Well, I'll take the last part of that question first, and then Adam can talk about what's next for the breast cancer program. Yeah, sure. Listen, we have a lot of programs here at Arvinas. We have clinical trials going on that we're running ourselves in prostate cancer with an androgen receptor degrader, so it's very much complementary to the estrogen receptor program in breast cancer. We have 25 or so programs that we've talked about on our public pipeline. We have a number listed, like KRAS, a classic undruggable, like CMYC, a classic undruggable. So that's kind of where, in the end, as I've mentioned before, I really think PROTACs, or targeted protein degradation, is going to distinguish itself from other modalities in these targets that just have been refractory. And quite frankly, we're also in neuroscience. There's many companies now. We were the first, but there's now many companies in the targeted protein degradation space. I think most of them are in cancer. There's also neuroimmunology. It's branching out tremendously. So it's been gratifying from my perspective to see the industry grow and being taken in so many different places. We could only do so much. Now I think the technology will help patients in all areas of diseases. And that's where it'll go next. Both Arvinas and other companies are taking it.
That's awesome. That's so exciting. I love it. All right, Adam, what's happening with this breast cancer trial? Wrap us up there and let us know what we can expect in the near future.
We'll continue to enroll the clinical trials around the world globally, and you can find more information on our clinical trials on clinicaltrials.gov. We plan to initiate a host of combination trials with CDK4, one of the next generation molecules in Pfizer, and we're looking to wrap up enrollment of the ongoing registration studies that I mentioned earlier as quickly as we can. So exciting data, new studies, new things, lots to come for sure.
And I have to add one thing. Because I don't want to get in trouble. So I mentioned we're in oncology, we're in neuroscience. I also have to say we're also in immuno-oncology as well. I don't want to get in trouble here at Arvinas that I left somebody up by mistake, which was easy. So anyway, thanks for letting me correct the record there.
for the record, we've got
Yeah,
the
thank you.
official list of therapeutic areas. I appreciate that. Well, thank you guys so much. I mean, this is really an exciting aspect of healthcare innovation, and I really appreciate you guys walking us through it because, like I said, you know, the health innovation space is really broad, and so if you don't know biotech, it's a little bit intimidating. But I appreciate your candor and I appreciate your enthusiasm for explaining the science behind this and how it's really being put into place in a very real and meaningful way, particularly in these breast cancer trials, you know, right now, and letting us in on what we can expect next. I thank you guys so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate you asking about it.
Oh my gosh, no, my pleasure. Well, thank you guys, the who's who of biotech, for stopping by. If you want to check out more interviews with the people who are changing the way that we do healthcare, you can head on over to my YouTube channel. It is youtube.com/WTF Health. I'm Jessica DeMassa. Thanks again for joining us. Fellows, we'll talk to you guys soon. We'll have to get an update when you guys are done with those trials and moved on to other things. And in the meantime, I hope everybody takes care, and we'll talk to you guys again real soon. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye.